I'm Rogers Anderson, Williamson County's mayor, and today we have the opportunity to visit and have a conversation with Julian Bibb. Many of you know Julian. He's a household name here in Franklin and Williamson County, and all of his activities done. And before I even get to discussing and say welcome, I want to say thank you for your public service that you have brought to our community.
Well, it's great being with you. I love this community. I came here in 1974 to teach high school and fell in love with Franklin and Williamson County.
Well, and that brings us to a little bit of genealogy. Let's touch on here. Where in the world did you come from? I know you're not from here, but this is home for you and your family. So take us back, and where did you come from, and a little bit about your family.
Well, I came from North Alabama, from Decatur, Alabama, on the Tennessee River, and went to school at Sewanee, and had a great experience up there. And met Jane, fell in love, married, moved this direction. My people were a combination of folks from North Alabama, and that's where my father grew up, and his father, and lots of Bibbs before him. And he married a woman from Lawrenceburg. My mother grew up in Lawrenceburg, and she grew up in a gospel music family. James D. Vaughn and Kiefer Vaughn were her folks, and they met right after the war and married, and she moved to Decatur, and there we got going.
So now, how many brothers and sisters?
I've got a brother who's in Birmingham and a sister in Fayetteville, Tennessee.
And your children, how many children do you have?
Oh, me. Well, Jane and I have 4 children. Our oldest is Julian, who many folks in this community have gotten to know, and Polly, my daughter, and Joseph and John. And Polly married this past summer, and she lives in New Orleans, but we're hoping to get her and Chris back. And Joseph lives here in town and is an artist, and John's a banker at Franklin Synergy Bank.
It's kind of interesting because I do know enough about you to be dangerous, and so some areas I won't go into, but I also know there's 2 current events in your life that you're probably very proud of. One is your wife is graduating, which may sound strange to a few folks, but Jane has followed a dream and a passion, and I know you're very, very proud of her.
Oh, Rogers, I am. It's the sweetest blessing. Jane and I married in Sewanee, and it was a senior falling in love with a freshman story. And then I came to Vanderbilt Law School, and but in between started teaching at BGA, and then later went back to Vanderbilt. But when Jane and I married, she didn't finish college and came to put me through law school, and eventually gets hired on. She's a lot more well known in the Franklin community in our early life than I was. She was a banker at the Bank of College Grove. That'll go back in time for a lot of folks, working with Tony Pewitt and Rufus Bagsby and others at that bank. But she didn't graduate from college, so after all of our children got through college, Jane was interested in going back and finishing, and we looked at a number of places and thought the best place to finish is where she had started. And so she's about to graduate in May with a degree from Sewanee, and it is the sweetest reward, one of life's real treasures. And she is so happy about it, and that makes me so happy.
Well, and that's a real testimonial to her passion, because of the second question that I know you and Jane are so proud about are the grandkids.
Goodness.
You've got a few of those.
We do. Julian married a teacher at New Hope Academy, Deborah Johnson, and then they have 3 children, our grandchildren, and Julian and Dovey and Eliza Vaughn. That's the sweetest experience anyone can have. Being a grandfather, being a grandparent is life's great, great dream.
Fast forward a little bit, you did some teaching in the early days at BGA. Probably had some great stories there with Coach Langstrom and others.
I did.
Then went on, I know you're currently, we'll give a plug for Stotts and Harbison, your current employer, and I guess been your only employer for the last several years.
Well, my whole career has been spent in the same place. You know, life is a circle in many degrees. I had gone to my first year at Vanderbilt in 1973, but I had a passion for teaching, and I wasn't sure about law school and being a lawyer, and so after that first year, I took off a year and taught at Battleground, and that's what Jane and I moved to Franklin. And I enjoyed that experience immensely. It's fun. Some of my students are still around here. I won't shout out their names and embarrass them, but I love that interaction with those young men, now much older men that I taught in the 11th grade. But one of the funny things that happened while I was teaching is I had never really left anything unfinished. And so I thought I had left law school unfinished, so I went back to Vanderbilt. And when I got out of law school, the chair of the board at Vanderbilt, at BGA, the chair of the board at BGA, Charlie Warfield, hired me into his firm, and I've been with him for 36 years. It was a great experience. Jane Bibb actually picked Franklin for us to live. When I was getting out of law school, I asked Jane, "Where do you want to go?" And she said, "I want to stay right here." And what a wonderful time it's been since then.
Well, and as we kind of kick the can down the road, an old country expression, I moved here in the late 70s, early 80s. Julian Bibb's name was already emerging as being in the volunteer areas of Williamson County, and particularly in Franklin, because that's where you make your home. But as I look back and you see so many of the organizations, and we refer to them as 501Cs, but you've had your finger involved in so many things. From one of the early ones that I think of is Mrs. Cross's involvement with the leadership class. You were involved in that, and Franklin Tamara and many others. Probably today in 2013, most people would see your face and acknowledge your name with a battlefield type person, a Civil War enthusiast, a preservation entrepreneur, but yet all the same time you're been engaged in the business and the business development and economic development of Williamson County likewise.
Well, it's been a true blessing to be in this community, because there are so many active community leaders that care about giving back, that care about making this place a better place to live for their children, their grandchildren, and future generations. And I've been excited to be part of those folks, and seeing the changes from 1974 to 2013, it's been phenomenal what has happened in our community, and so many positive things have happened. I've loved the involvement. In the early days, I think my first nonprofit experience was with the Soccer Association. I got involved with it from when Julian was 5. I ran into Ed Silva and I said, "I hear about this thing called soccer." That shows how much I knew about it.
Well, they didn't play soccer in Alabama anymore than they did in Knoxville, Tennessee, where I'm coming from.
They didn't. And Ed told me about the Soccer Association. I think they had about 180 children in the entire association playing at that point in time. And I got involved in coaching at that early age, which meant rolling a soccer ball out to a bunch of 5-year-olds and hoping I would learn something along the way. But as I did that, I met Lois Fernandez and Jose Fernandez, and they had with Mr. Eckhart put together the Soccer Association in its early formation, and it was, all the games were being played in 2 places, in the Franklin Special School District elementary school over on New Highway 96, and then behind the elementary school back over in the west side of town. And what I remember about when you played on that field is that you would, if you were the first game, you went and untied the goat, and if you were the last game, you moved the goat back to the field. But that genesis, being involved in that program, I got to work on the acquisition in 3 separate stages, and the county was such a great partner, because we moved from playing on those school fields over to the Boyd Mill property. And TVA owned that property.
Which would be referred to now as the Downs property.
That's right, the Downs Boulevard property. That's exactly. And the first acquisition took place. I can remember we got together with the TVA, and they said they would give it to the county to lease to the Soccer Association, and they'd give it to the county for $1. And the Soccer Association then took off. The fields were put in. The passion for soccer started growing. This is in the mid '80s, and we then started playing on TVA property that we didn't have a deed to. And TVA said, well, it sounds like you need to expand your soccer field, and so we acquired the rest of the property on the east side of Downs Boulevard, running from where the Robert Ring Soccer Center is back all the way to Twin Oaks. And I think that cost us $1,000 to acquire that property. And then later we worked with the county and you and Bob Ring and others to put in the Bob Ring indoor facility. And then the last acquisition was on the west side of Downs Boulevard, those beautiful fields that were completed. TVA made us pay a little bit more money for that, and the county always came through. Another great thing that happened that just has made soccer this thousands and thousands of person experience that it is for our county is when Doug Hood came to the county. And Doug Hood came in as head of Parks and Rec. And in the early days, we had a referendum on whether or not the county could be involved in all these activities. But you could see the benefit from the county being the group that was leading Parks and Recreation.
And Doug brought an idea. You know, in those early days, I'm clicking back through my mind, and there was two ladies that I know you know very well, Judy Shuford and Kathy Odom at that time.
Yes.
That were kind of the matriarchs of sports as we know it, Parks and Recreation here in Williamson County. If you really go back, and the people watching this show, those were the early days of soccer. But Kathy and Judy really took on this animal that we call Parks and Rec now, and when Bob Ring was the county executive, he had a very strong passion for soccer. Eventually, he had a son that went on and got a scholarship and played pro ball.
Yes.
But you look back, of course, Kathy had, I don't know, 6, 7 kids, and Judy had not quite that many, but she had several too. And they just had a love for the soccer, and then eventually into the baseball area, and all of us working together. And I remember that first experience with the Franklin Rec Center where it's at. It was about half in the city and half in the county, so the arrangements were made that the county would build it and the city would operate, and then Fieldstone Parks came along with the baseball, the softball fields. And the city really didn't have a parks department. The county really didn't have much more than okay, we're in the parks business, but it was as you said, the genesis and the beginning of time for Parks and Recreation, and today it's well accepted all throughout the state of Tennessee. We have great schools, but we also have a great park system, and it's a constant challenge to take that product out to the other surrounding parts of our county. Overall, it always boils down to dollars and cents and where can you invest in your community. But we tried to do that from Fairview to Brentwood to Burwood to College Grove. And overall, Doug has been the catalyst to see that all of that has been done.
Well, it has been amazing. As I look at the park system in this county, and having worked with you and Doug on several things other than soccer, one of the little interesting unknown facts is that Harlansdale Farm, which is a city park now, most folks don't know that Rogers Anderson and Doug Hood probably saved the bacon on that becoming a park, because in those days, those early planning days, the county stepped up to be a partner. Eventually the city took the whole thing on, but if it hadn't been for Doug Hood and your leadership, I don't think the park would have worked.
Yeah. I don't know about that. I do know one thing. We have a great system. We work in conjunction with our city membership, just like county government needs to work with cities. I mean, we're taping this show, and there's so much going on in Nashville this week. So if you want to know when this show was taped, you just kind of refer back to what's going on in Nashville. It's about annexation. It's about charter voucher schools. It's about everything. And there's always different sides. You're in the legal profession. I suspect not all of your activities have always been 100% in agreement.
That's right.
And you and you know, all of us have been married, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, depending if you're the male or the female gender. You might have a difference of opinion what the percentage is. But I've always said that counties and cities can work together, should work together for the betterment of our taxpayers. Oftentimes people say, well, why don't you have a metropolitan form of government? And I just can't imagine we'd have had the things that we've got in Franklin or in Brentwood or in this county if you only had one centralized sense of government, that because you wind up having to do what you do for one area, you have to do for the other area. Kind of like we do our schools, and it's very costly. It's not to say that it shouldn't be done. You do have some economies of scale, but in my experience, and this is just a sidebar opinion and people can call in, the one thing that always hurts in a metropolitan form of a government, shouldn't, but it does, is our public education. Our 4 major cities we have, they're struggling with how to deal with public education because you've got so much diversity out there, whereas in a smaller scale area, you can get some things done. And just like big business, the bigger that business is, the harder it is for that elephant to go down that road.
That's right.
Fast forward, here we are in 2013. Lots of activities are occurring in the historical area of our, predominantly in Franklin, that you have had your fingers in, that you stir that pot. You've had connections in Washington. You've been often identified and even heralded as a man of vision, a man who's persistent, and a man that just will not take no, and so therefore you learn how to get things done through others and working with that. Talk to us a little bit about the historical side of it.
Well, it's been a fun part of my life to be involved in the historic preservation of this community. It started, you know, I think what really happens is you do have a passion for things, but you meet some great leaders and hard workers along the way. And I first began to get involved with historic preservation when I got involved with Mary Pierce. And gosh, we had all
Is she
types
not a
of
lightning
things.
rod, both for and against?
Yes, her passion for this community is huge. We got initially working together when Main Street was redone, and there were so many heroes of that effort, from Calvin Lehue to Ed Silva to Mary and Rudy Jordan, and just so many people in the community. And then the Board of Mayor and Aldermen stepped up and made that happen, and it transformed Franklin. It also transformed the economic development side because a vision was really realized through that Main Street program. But there have been lots of historic sites that I have worked on with Mary to preserve or improve, and that's been fun. But in 2004, I got connected with a group of folks that wanted to start to reclaim the Franklin Civil War battlefield. Robert Hicks that was his vision, and Warner Bass and Rudy Jordan and Mary Pierce and Ernie Bacon and others, and they had a notion to acquire the Franklin Country Club, and at that time the owner had put it up on the market for sale, and that was a difficult time because it was very expensive, and it was kind of a thought of, my goodness, you're going to take this golf course and this country club that has been operating, and now it's going to become a public park, and how is that going to work, and how expensive is it going to be? And that effort has been successful, and it continues to be developed. The road currently is being placed in with a TDOT grant that will allow visitors to get to enjoy the park. But there's so much more that we'll do. MTSU and the Center for Civil War Historic Preservation is putting together signage about the troop movements, and it'll be an incredible product when it's finished. Following that success, we've moved our efforts to Columbia Avenue and have successfully seen the Pizza Hut go down, and we've recently acquired Domino's, a strip center, an office building, and 3 homes, and we have 3 other properties that the owners of those properties are negotiating with us. Since 2004, we have invested about $10 or $11 million in acquiring developed sites with the plan to remove the development off those sites and turn it into a public park that is reflective of Franklin's Civil War heritage. And it is an extremely expensive process. Washington has been a great friend of ours. The Civil War Trust out of Washington, D.C. has been a huge friend. The American Battlefield Protection Program, which is a funding source through the National Park System, has been a great friend. I've testified in some congressional hearings about the need for this. The National Park has made a study of all of our Civil War sites and released the importance of what we're doing. And so it's been a transforming event. One fun thing is that our credibility really happened in 2005 when the National Geographic did a story on America's Civil War parks, and they had Gettysburg and Antietam, and they were going to use Franklin as a poster child for a community that had paved over its history. And Adam Goodhart, who wrote that article, came down and visited, and Robert Hicks and I had a meeting with him, and we said, well, Adam, you're missing the news story, and the news story is what we're doing. And he thought we were just salesmen, so he said, well, let me talk to some other people. And he did, and he came back and got it. And that April 2005 edition of the National Geographic had more print on Franklin, Tennessee than it had on any of the other battlefield parks that all of us have grown up reading our history books and going to see as children. I have recently learned that the National Geographic is thinking about doing a follow-up 10 years later, so that would be 2015. Now, they haven't committed to do it, but they're thinking about doing a follow-up about what happened 10 years later in Franklin and Williamson County about their Civil War efforts.
Julian, and I know that there's so many people. It reminds me, let me kind of explain it in this format, that you and I both moved in here. We were not born and certainly not raised here. Now, we have raised our entire families here.
That's right.
And oftentimes when you and I go back to our high school class reunions, the ones the furthest away make the biggest effort to come back and see people.
Yes.
And the locals that are in that town, of wherever your high school is at, oftentimes do not come to the event. And they have various reasons for not doing that because they see things on a day-by-day basis and probably is not as engaged as oftentimes some of the others people in that community because they're born and raised there. Not all, that's not a common denominator statement. That is a fact that I see oftentimes when I go back to my class reunions. I kind of liken that to some of the people that have lived here in Williamson County their entire life. And I appreciate them living here, raising their families here, making this community what it is today. Someone will come along after me and you and take it to the next level, whatever that level is. And rightfully so, if you're watching this show, we need young males and females to step up and carry on this tradition that we have been given the torch to, and say you carry it for a while until the next person comes along. Kind of explain what those involvements mean in terms of visitors, and if you know the dollars, I should have done my homework before I got here and looked at that. But our economic development piece on visitors and tourism coming to our community has had phenomenal success. Now, these are the people that come in from out of state, other places, spend their dollars, stay 2 or 3 days, and they're out of here. It's a huge, huge number.
It is. Roger, you are right. It is a growing number. The Civil War sites have increased their tourism by about 400% since these efforts began. But what I really see is that through your leadership, the city leadership, an entity called the Williamson County Convention Visitors Bureau was created, and you led us in a lot of dialogue with community leaders about how to create that entity, and it now is serving Williamson County, it is bringing in so much more money. We have moved up to just below. We're now one of the chief tourist destinations below every large community and the Smoky Mountains.
Well, you're not going to beat Dolly Parton's place.
That's right.
That's a tourist trap.
But we have our prominence in the state and national figures for tourism and the clean dollars that they bring in, because we all operate off sales tax revenues, and that runs the boat in Tennessee. And Franklin's and Williamson County sales tax revenues are just going up astronomically.
And you have to touch on, we've got a couple of minutes left, but we have to touch on this new and exciting, it's a piece of our music history and heritage, and we're focusing on Civil War. But today there's another piece called Americana music that many people are engaged in. That door is opening up for another avenue of tourism and business. We are so blessed to have some of the finest country music writers, entertainers, musicians, Christian music, likewise, on and on and on in our community. But get ready for the next wave, and it's called Americana music.
Well, it is, and it's exciting. The efforts being put together to make that program successful, the music trails being studied that will run right through the heart of our community. It's a phenomenal and exciting vision. Aubrey Preston and others in our community have set this out, and it will bring in more and more tourists. It will continue to make us one of the best places to be.
Now, I concur that we've currently got some issues with transportation, getting from point A to point B. I think we all acknowledge that, and our community will continue to grow, but some of these efforts have to be put in place that we will continue to grow, such as the Americana. Julian, we got 1 minute left. I probably have overlooked something. I've probably not addressed something that you really would like to say. This is your opportunity, or if I've overlooked an individual that kind of picked you up by the bootstraps and said, hey, go forth and make Williamson County a better place.
Well, what I really would like to say is that all of us who live in Williamson County are incredibly blessed to be in this place. And it is important that we all pass that torch that you were talking about on to the future generations, because this is a treasure, and we're fortunate to be here and share in it. So many people in this community work hard to make it work, and it's a place that government works, nonprofit works, community volunteers work, and they all work to make life better for the people that live here. And that's an exciting part of being here.
And you're our treasure today, and we appreciate you watching our show. We have to go. I'm Roger Sanderson. Today we've enjoyed talking to Julian Bibb. See you around the county.
Where can I find out about the Venus flytrap?
Where can I research information on my business competitors?
What is the safety record on the car I want?
Where can I research careers?
Where?
I'm all shook up.
The Tennessee Electronic Library. That's where. And it's free to everyone in our state. Now go to your public library and find out how you can log on and get your password to a world of information just for living in our state. Or you can probably even figure out the password just by listening to my voice.
Hey, hey, I'm all shook up.